Midday on our 7th day, we arrived in Quebec, which was the earliest known French settlement in North America, a base having been established briefly in 1541. Then in 1607, Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec, the name taken from the local Indian word for where the river narrows, and the city became the capital of New France. Quebec changed hands between French and British several times, was taken finally by the British in 1759, and the whole of New France was ceded officially to Britain in 1763. We had 2.5 days here, and we used the first 2 to explore the city. On exiting the arrivals departures lounge at the port, we were distracted by loud pop music, and on investigating discovered a classic car collection all along one street, leading away from the old town centre. We walked along and admired the cars, then doubled back down a parking street right under the cliff between the upper and lower towns. Luckily, this led us back to the approach to the old town centre.
There, I see. Now throw yourself at it.
This mural just outside the Place Royale depicts the 400 years of Quebec history. Place Royale itself is where de Champlain made his first outpost. The area suffered damage from British attacks, and over the years, those that could built homes in the safer upper city. Once the British finally took over, the area flourished again. It did become somewhat of a slum in the late 1800s, but received a facelift in the 1960s when it was restored to French-style glory and is now full of boutique shops, art galleries, eating places and tourists. This church was built on the spot of the original outpost. It was started in 1688 and took 35 years to build. It has suffered battle damage over the years, but has been renovated in recent decades to its French colonial character. You can get from the lower town to the upper by road or by pedestrian steps, but by far the easiest is to use the funicular. Built in 1879 and originally using counterweight water processes and steam power, it has been modernised periodically over the years. The entrance is located in a historic building that was once the home of Louis Joliet, who lived there in the late 19th century. He was a fur trader and explorer who led the expedition to find and map the Mississippi River in 1666. We decided to have lunch in the restaurant next door before going up to the upper town. By the time we'd finished, the afternoon guided tours had arrived and there was a long queue for the funicular, so we walked up the steps. Rather more steps than we'd realised. The funicular and the steps take you up to the Dufferin Terrace, immediately in front of the Hotel de Frontenac, a famous landmark which has dominated the city's skyline since it opened in 1893. We had a quick look around the ground floor lobby and the shops. The square behind the terrace houses the tourist office. We popped in to make a booking for an out-of-town sightseeing trip on our 3rd day. Many of the tours start at the bus stops in the square, as do the horse-drawn carriage tours. We had already booked a city tour for our 2nd day. The city tour bus went first to La Citadelle, a fortress situated above the river at the southern end of Dufferin Terrace. The fortress was started by the French but finished in stone by the British after the 1812 war. It successfully deterred any further attacks, together with the walls which run from the citadel for about 3.5 miles around the city back to the natural cliff defences by the port. The fields just outside the walls, the Plains of Abraham, were the site of the final battle between the French and the British in 1759. Also just outside the walls is the State Parliament building, finished in 1886. The Fountain de Tournai in front had stood in Bordeaux for over 100 years, but it had been dismantled and stored for over 40 years when Quebec retailer Peter Simons found, transported and renovated the fountain and gave it to Quebec for the city's 400th anniversary, as a thank you from his department stores, which were first established in Quebec by his family 5 generations earlier. The bus tour brought us back to the centre of the upper town, passing through many picturesque streets. The guide had pointed out the oldest restaurant in Quebec, so we made our way there for lunch via this fascinating pedestrian alley. Café Baud was established in 1919 and is still going strong. After lunch, we walked about to have a closer look at some of the buildings we'd passed on the tour, such as the City Hall, dating from 1896, and, nearly as old as the buildings in the lower town, the Cathedral Notre Dame de Quebec, which was built in 1647. It had been bombarded and suffered fires during its history, each time renovated according to the original plans, and the interior is exquisite. The city within the walls, both upper and lower, became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1985, and very much does the city deserve it.